Before Angkor, before Ayutthaya, there was Pagan, a mighty kingdom once hidden in the heart of Myanmar's dry plains, where over 10,000 temples once dotted the horizon, each one a silent prayer of stone and stucco rising into the skies. Yet today, few outside Southeast Asia remember the Pagan Empire. Even fewer understand just how powerful it once was. From a sleepy cluster of villages on the banks of the Irrawaddy River, Pagan rose to become the first empire to unify the regions of modern-day Myanmar. Its kings ruled with divine authority. Its monks shaped Theravada Buddhism for generations to come. Its legacy? Written not in books, but in bricks. This is the story of Pagan, an empire of faith, power, and breathtaking beauty, now mostly forgotten, but never truly gone. Before Pagan became an empire, it was just a cluster of villages on the banks of the Irrawaddy River, a land of dusty plains, wandering monks, and rice paddies rustling in the wind. The people who settled there were the Mranma, ancestors of the Bamar. They had journeyed south in the 9th century, following the great river like a silver thread through the heart of the land. They built canals. They raised shrines. They whispered to the gnat spirits of trees and stones. And slowly they began to dream. At first, Pagan was just one among many petty kingdoms, surrounded by powerful rivals, the Mon to the south, the Pew remnants, the Shan in the highlands. But fate had chosen Pagan for something greater. And then came the man who would shape that destiny, King Anawrahta, who took the throne in 1044. Anawrahta was no ordinary ruler. He was a visionary, a warrior, and above all, a believer. He saw the disorder of the realm, fragmented by old cults, corrupt monks, and warring chiefs. And he knew that only one thing could bind the land: faith. When he conquered the Mon kingdom of Thatan, he did not take slaves or gold as his prize. He took books, palm leaf manuscripts of Theravada Buddhism, monks, relics, scriptures. He brought them all back to Pagan and declared a new beginning. The old ways, animism, Mahayana, tantric rites, were swept aside. Theravada Buddhism would be the path of the kingdom, a path of clarity, structure, and moral discipline. But he didn't stop at belief. He built canals to feed the rice fields. He reorganized land ownership. He reformed the priesthood. Anawrahta united the Irrawaddy Valley for the first time in history, not through brute force alone, but through sacred authority. He became a Dhammaraja, a king who ruled not just by law, but by dharma. And under his rule, Pagan transformed, from a river town into a sacred capital, from scattered hamlets into an empire with a soul. He commissioned temples, hundreds of them, each one a beacon of merit, each brick laid with purpose. Pilgrims began to arrive. Scribes copied scriptures in Burmese script. The king knelt beside monks, and the people followed. By the time Anawrahta died in 1077, Pagan was no longer a name whispered along the riverbanks. It was a shining center of faith, culture, and unity. The sun had risen over Pagan, and the plains would never look the same again. As Pagan rose, so did its temples, not one or two, but thousands. By the 12th century, the Pagan plain had become one of the most extraordinary landscapes in human history. A vast, open plain, dotted with over 10,000 stupas, temples, and monasteries, stretching across the dry zone like a field of sacred mountains. It was not built by slaves, not by royal decree alone, but by devotion. every man, woman, and king believed that to build a temple was to build merit, to plant the seeds of a better rebirth in this life and the next. And so they built. Farmers donated bricks. Merchants paid for murals. Kings constructed towering pagodas wrapped in gold leaf, their names inscribed in stone, not to boast, but to be remembered by the heavens. The great temples still stand, Ananda glowing with symmetry and serenity, That Bayinyu piercing the sky with elegance, Shwezigon crowned in golden light, each one a monument not to empire but to faith. Inside, the air was cool and still, walls painted with stories from the Buddha's many lives, the Jataka tales, the wheel of rebirth, the path to enlightenment. Pilgrims came from far and wide, from Bengal, from Sri Lanka, even from the Khmer Empire, to witness this sacred city. The skyline of Pagan was not made of towers and palaces, but of spires and domes, rising from the earth like prayers made visible. And yet, for all its beauty, Pagan was also organized. The land was measured. Temple holdings were registered. Canals were maintained, feeding rice fields across the plains. Inscriptions documented every donation, every tax exemption, every royal order. It was a spiritual state, but one with ledgers, maps, and rules. The monks debated philosophy. The scribes copied texts in Pali and Burmese. The artisans carved celestial beings into sandstone. And through it all, the rhythm of devotion never ceased. Even the bricks were stamped with the names of donors, each one a quiet whisper from the past. This was Pagan at its height, a sacred forest of brick and belief, a capital where stones sang, and every sunrise lit the golden domes of merit. But empires, even the holy ones, do not last forever, and the ground beneath Pagan was beginning to shift. No empire rises forever, and no golden age escapes the shadows. Pagan, in all its beauty and holiness, had sown the seeds of its own decline. The very thing that made it majestic, its temples, would also be its undoing. As kings, nobles, and citizens competed to build monuments of merit, they gave land to monasteries, village after village, field after field, until nearly 2/3 of all arable land was tax-exempt. The monks grew powerful. The state did not. Without revenue, the crown could no longer support its army, or maintain its irrigation canals, or pay its officials in the provinces. The balance between spiritual and political power began to tip, and the foundation started to crack. Then came the final blow from far beyond the plains of Burma. In the north, Kublai Khan had risen, the Mongol emperor of China. In 1277, Pagan faced its first Mongol invasion. In 1287, a second one came, swift, brutal, unfamiliar with the heat, but devastating nonetheless. King Naratihapate, often called the king who fled from the Chinese, was unable to stop them. He tried to negotiate, then escaped south, then died, betrayed and poisoned by his own son. The capital, once glowing with gold and incense, was shaken, plundered, abandoned. But it wasn't just the Mongols. By then, Pagan's empire was already brittle. Regional lords had broken away. The bureaucracy had withered. The sacred order had unraveled. What the Mongols broke was already fractured. After 1287, Pagan never fully recovered. The monarchy dissolved into rivalries. The temples stood, but the kings were gone. And so the city faded, not in fire, but in silence. The great bells stopped ringing. The rice fields dried without canals. The monks stayed, but the pilgrims stopped coming. The plains remained, but the empire had vanished. For the next 400 years, no kingdom would unite Myanmar again, and Pagan became a city of ghosts. Pagan had fallen, but not everything was lost. Though its kings were gone, its spirit remained. The temples still stood, scorched by sun, shaken by earthquakes, but never fully broken. Their bricks, faded by centuries of wind and rain, still whispered the prayers of those who built them. Their domes still caught the golden light at dawn. Their shadows still stretched across the Irrawaddy plain as they always had. And beneath those silent stones, a deeper legacy began to grow. From Pagan came the Burmese script, refined, standardized, and still used in Myanmar today. From Pagan came Theravada Buddhism, established as the dominant faith in the region, replacing old rituals with structure, myth with mindfulness. From Pagan came architecture, brick stupas, tiered roofs, sacred floor plans, copied in Ava, mirrored in Mandalay, echoed even in temples of Thailand and Laos. Later kings, from Tungu to Konbang, all trace their legitimacy to Pagan. They called themselves heirs of Anurata, builders of Dharma, guardians of the sacred flame. Even the most powerful of them, King Alangpaya, claimed to be a rebirth of the pagan monarchs. They rebuilt temples, revived rituals, and reconnected the fractured land with the memory of its golden past. But the greatest legacy of Pagan was never just its temples. It was the idea that a kingdom could be built not only on power, but on belief. A civilization where merit outweighed ambition, where bricks became prayers, and temples became time machines. Even today, in the quiet hours of dawn, monks still walk barefoot among the ruins. Tourists still pause in awe before a crumbling Buddha, and the wind still moves through the arches like breath through an old lung. Pagan is no longer an empire, but it is not dead. It lives in the silence. It lives in the script. It lives in the rhythm of chanting voices rising once more from the stones. A city fallen, but never truly gone. The temples of Pagan were never random. They were built with purpose, with mathematics, and with cosmic meaning. Each one, no matter how small, was a diagram of the universe, a mandala in brick, a map of the sacred. At the center stood Mount Meru, the mythical axis of all things, represented by the towering core of each stupa or shrine. Around it, the outer terraces mirrored heavenly realms, guarded by lions, ogres, and devas carved into stone. And beyond that, the open earth, the realm of mortals, where pilgrims walked, offering flowers, oil lamps, and folded hands. But these were not just symbolic layouts. They were embodied beliefs. The temples taught, not with sermons, but with structure. Every direction had meaning. East for enlightenment, south for letting go, west for death, north for rebirth. When you entered a pagan temple, you didn't just walk through space, you walked through the Buddha's path. The long corridors twisted clockwise, a sacred direction known as pradakshina. Each step was a meditation, each pause a moment to breathe. The walls, covered in murals and inscriptions, depicted the Jataka tales, stories of the Buddha's past lives. Every image was a lesson, every scene a reflection of karma. And above, some temples had acoustic domes, designed to carry the sound of chants upward. as if the prayers could rise straight into the heavens. Temples like Ananda, crafted in the shape of a perfect Greek cross, glow with geometrical harmony. Its inner sanctum houses 4 Buddhas, facing each cardinal direction, watching over the world in eternal silence. The HTI, the umbrella spire atop every pagoda, was more than decoration. It was a cosmic crown, linking earth and sky. No 2 temples in Pagan are exactly alike, but they all speak the same language, the language of form, of balance, of belief. And though centuries have passed, their proportions still whisper to us. Their shadows still fall in perfect alignment with the sun. Their bricks still carry heat at dusk, as if still alive. In Pagan, architecture was not just an art. It was a prayer in geometry, etched into the earth, so that even long after the kings were dust, the Dharma would remain, measured, aligned, eternal. Centuries passed. The kings of Pagan faded into legend. The monks continued to chant in crumbling halls, and the temples stood, alone, silent, half buried by time and wind. For generations, the world forgot Pagan. But the stones remembered. In the 19th century, during the British colonization of Burma, foreign archaeologists and officials stumbled upon the plain of Bagan. What they saw shocked even the most seasoned explorers. Thousands of temples, scattered like sacred seeds across the earth. Many half collapsed, others still glowing gold in the evening light. A lost city, a forest of faith, a mystery waiting to be touched again. They called it the Pompeii of the East. But Bagan had never been buried, only overlooked. Photographers captured its spires against the sunrise, scholars copied inscriptions into thick notebooks, and slowly, the world began to remember Pagan. But memory can be cruel, and not all who came treated Bagan with care. In the rush to restore its glory, governments rebuilt temples using modern cement, painted over ancient murals with bright acrylics, and built viewing towers that scarred the sacred skyline. UNESCO refused to list Bagan as a World Heritage Site, not because it lacked value, but because it was not protected with respect. Then came the earthquakes, 1975, and again in 2016. Temples cracked, stupas fell, bricks rained down like dust from history itself. But once again, Bagan endured. Local monks, artisans, and volunteers joined hands with conservators and historians to rebuild, not just the stones, but the spirit of the place. And in 2019, after decades of hope, Bagan was finally declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Today, hot air balloons float above the plain at dawn, casting long shadows over golden stupas. Pilgrims light candles at twilight. Tourists wander barefoot through sacred ruins. But if you stop and listen carefully, you'll hear more than footsteps. You'll hear breath. You'll feel time moving differently. You'll sense the heartbeat of a civilization that never truly died. In every cracked brick, in every weathered Buddha, in every whispered chant at dusk, Pagan lives on. Not just in textbooks, not just in ruins, but in the human need to build something holy, to leave something behind, to make meaning out of dust and devotion. The empire has fallen, the kings are gone, but the Dharma still echoes. And the temples still shine beneath the same golden sun that watched them rise 1,000 years ago.